London is a world cultural capital and famous for its theatrical heritage. Every night, you can see a range of productions from musicals to classical drama at more than 100 theaters. Some of them have even been running for 50 years or more. But there's still room for contemporary and even exotic stories on the London stage. Meanwhile, influential and respected British plays are being put on the stage all over the world. Border crossings will never be a surprise for us. Today, we will meet with Michael Wally, who has directed numerous productions in many different countries, to talk with him about his new play and how he crossed the cultural boundaries, brought the UK and China onto the same stage. What a pleasure to be able to spend time with you, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you very much, you too.
So I know you have a long history of working in the theater and opera. Would you like to share that with us for people who might not be very familiar with Michael Wally?
Sure. Well, gosh, I suppose I've been working in theatre for more than 25 years, ever since I left university. So it is quite a long time, you're right, and with Border Crossings now for 18 years since I set the company up. And you're right that I also have a parallel career, if you like, in opera, which is really useful because, you know, in the operatic forms, you have this sort of amazing scale and music, and in the theatre, you have all the detail of text and precise acting. And I find bringing elements of each into the other is very, very helpful. So, yeah, I like to direct both.
A strange tale of love between two people, one English, one Chinese, set in Shanghai. An attempt to communicate without a common language, each person feeling for the other in a virtual world. The complicated story unfolds against the background of three separate countries. This is the world of Consumed, a new mystery which has just toured England. It's a bilingual production in English and Mandarin. The Chinese title is Guanxi, and the play has been co-created by the Border Crossing Theatre Group in association with Shanghai Dramatic Arts Centre, China's leading contemporary theatre. What is Consume about, and what role are you playing in it?
This role's name is Tong Zheng, and he's on the story, and he just come back after 25 years and left the country and in America and come back to do some business here. And actually 25 years ago, he left his girlfriend here and with a promise, but he didn't do.
In the first place, with a response to the second play we made with China, which was a play called Reorientations, and Song Ruhui, who I think you're going to be talking to a bit later, was in that piece. And at the end of the run in Shanghai, she and I went out for a drink with an interpreter, and she said she wanted to do another piece with us where again it was devised, by which I mean, there's no particular writer, we all create it together, but which had a smaller cast and which concentrated more on people of our generation, because, you know, she and I are both in our later 40s. And for China, I think that's really, really interesting, because those are the people who have lived through the enormous period of change which has gone on, you know, since the death of Mao Zedong. And so their lives sort of encapsulate a history, and we were interested to think about the speed of change that's been going on in the world. And in parallel to that, we noticed that while a lot of the audience were watching that show in China, they were actually watching it through cameras or phones or other electronic devices, almost as if people needed this kind of filter between them and the live body of the actor. And I thought that was really fascinating and told us something about this very strange, connected, globalized, mediaized world that we now live in, where we're apparently getting closer to each other through computers and iPhones and Skype and social media. But perhaps in many ways we're also being driven away from the physical experience of engaging with other people in the same room. And people are becoming in some ways more and more isolated by the virtual world.
Everybody's working late.
Hello. Your attention, please.
I know this story is about love, money, and technology.
Yes.
And I'm wondering where the stories comes from. Was it from your own experience or something?
Well, it's very interesting. Some bits are, and then things were happening while we were in Shanghai, which just fed into the script. Like my daughter wanted a Chinese doll, and I couldn't find one because there are very, very few toy shops in Shanghai, and the ones that are mainly full of westernized products like Barbie. Eventually I found a Chinese doll in a little side street somewhere, and it was a huge relief. And so that became something that just fed into the script. It's a little detail, but it was interesting to see how that worked.
Well, I've been trying. This is like a zero toy store here or anything. I mean, the one they have, just like a Barbie and stuff. Of course, they're all made in China.
Hey, maybe all depends on what she mean by a Chinese doll. They're all kind of Chinese doll, right?
我们在上海做这个练习的时候，我们的那个男演员就说大家做什么呢？说，我们做一个这样的练习吧，你们两个人在一个公司的食堂里见面了，见什么面呢？我们两人是一种什么关系呢？说谁都不知道，那咱们就坐下来吧。哎，坐下来在那想，在想的过程当中，我们俩就无聊当中的，其实也不是戏，就无聊当中的对话。桌上摆了吃的什么之类的，完了问他好吃吗？完了他就就是鸡同鸭讲一样的说什么东西，我就点说这东西什么东西，他说哦很好很好很好。
Ning Li, for example, he's a performer who speaks both English and Chinese. Hui speaks only Chinese, Serge speaks only English. And Li, the reason he speaks both languages very well is because when he was a younger man, he went from China to America, and he married an American. And elements of his experience, someone coming back from the States to China to live again, started to feed into the character he made. So we bring in aspects of ourselves and then we turn them into fiction.
But how do you how to see that digest or reuse something that you have in your life and is very valuable, but it's not completely like I can just pick up and use in this show. So, and actually all those stuff is just during the chit chat with Michael. Is not really during the devising practice. Yeah.
A bilingual English-Chinese play has opened in London to rave reviews. Consumed is a collaboration between art companies from London and Shanghai.
If you are not interested in China, this means you are not interested in the 21st century. Michael said these words to the Chinese Weekly.
Absolutely fantastic, really fascinating and interesting, very modern, very thrilling, and also quite romantic, I thought.
It can connect with different people because there's different elements of love in adults and love for children as well.
And also I like the sort of thriller idea of stealing the information from the laptop. It gave it really like a lot of tension as well.
I think people are very excited to see a new form of theatre where you're seeing Chinese people actually talking about China and not the sort of exotic I'm pretending to be Chinese thing, not something which is old-fashioned and traditional, although that has its place. But this is about what it feels like to be alive right now and the interaction between China and the West. And I think that's the really, really crucial thing, that we're not talking anymore about people living in little pockets. We're talking about a world where everyone is having to communicate, where people are living in the same global space. And the big question which we have to ask as a changing culture is how are we going jointly to inhabit this globalized space?
So where did you learn to do all this?
Self-taught. But these days you can learn plenty stuff on YouTube. Little videos step by step got you through the art of cybercrime. It's Hacker 7.
You can see why they don't allow YouTube in China.
Oh, that's bigger cybercrime.
Since its introduction to Britain by the Romans, theatre has influenced all aspects of life. In Shakespeare's time, the audience could walk around during the performance, and even eat and drink. They cheered, booed, and sometimes even threw objects at the actors. But in this period, the English Renaissance sowed the seeds that would make theatre such an important art form. Hundreds of years later, musicals dominate London's traditional West End stages. But some of the most serious new work has found a home in the fringe, where smaller, independent groups examine important ideas and themes. London has absorbed many cultures in its time, bringing many tensions. So how exactly can theatre respond to that?
We've worked with, obviously Western performers, but we've worked in India, we've worked in Africa, we've worked with Indigenous Australians and Native Americans. We make pieces which are in some way responding to our relationship as British people with a wider world, and therefore also to do with the way London is now, which is such a cosmopolitan city. It's like a planet. You hear so many languages as you walk down the street, and I think it's very important that as a cultural organisation we address that. Border crossings are places where people have to declare themselves. You know, and you have to say who you are, and you define yourself, and that's not always a comfortable thing, because sometimes you're being politically defined, and sometimes they're very dangerous places, and sometimes they're places where people meet and people are able to cross over and experience something of the other.
How did you begin the links with China?
It happened in response to an opera, actually, which I was working on at the English National Opera. Our Border Crossings patron, Peter Sellers, is a very famous American director, and he did a piece called Nixon in China, which is about Richard Nixon's visit to Mao Zedong in 1972. And I became very, very interested in Chinese culture. And at the same time, at Border Crossings, we were doing a play with some Indian performers called Orientations, which was a devised piece. And I was watching that play one night, and there's a moment in it where one of the characters says to the other, "Have you got any children?" And he replies, "I've got a daughter, she's 18. And he's clearly very uncomfortable about this girl. And we hadn't really developed it beyond that. We just wanted to imply there was something about him which was disturbing. And I thought, for some reason, I suddenly thought, that girl is in China. And I had never been, and I knew very little about the country, but as soon as I could, it wasn't the next day, but as soon as I could, I got on a plane and I went to Shanghai.
Away from the theatre, what is your first impression of China?
It's amazing. I think the first impression, it's casting my mind back some way now, because it's 7-8 years ago when I first went, but I think the thing that struck me the most was how many people there are. And you walk through the streets, people. And it's not like London, where, as we were just saying, London's so cosmopolitan. They're all different sorts of people. These Chinese people. And that's almost overwhelming. The other thing, of course, is because the language is so very different, it's really hard to pick up on anything quickly. So, because as a Westerner, you're expecting to hear, subject, verb, object, and it just isn't like that. So there isn't an easy route into communicating. So you become very reliant either on interpreters or bilingual menus and things like that. And that was quite an alien experience for me, because usually when I've been to a foreign country, I've been able to eat, drink, and sleep fairly easily. In China, you can't. And so that distance, that slight alienation, I think was very interesting. And it's certainly a part of what has made this play.
希望我们有一个很好的合作。
Sorry, I don't understand.
At the start time and the stories was just beginning to evolve, and I believe you had to do a lot of discussion and communication with the actors.
Yes.
And one of them doesn't speak English.
That's right. Yeah, she doesn't. Well, I mean, she's the one who I, in some ways, know the best because she was in reorientations as well. And of course, we can't talk to each other directly, but Ning Li speaks both languages. During rehearsals, we've had interpreters. Dory, our video artist, speaks both languages. And Hui is a very remarkable creative artist, so it doesn't need very much. You know, I can say, maybe in this scene this is happening, and she will make something.
这个问题恰恰成了这个戏的一部分，所以蛮有趣的，就是完全语言不通，但是我们必须沟通，需要什么方法呢？一知半解的单词，肢体语言，所以构成了这样的一个戏。我们这个戏里头，你还没看过吧？你有一部分就是这样的东西，反而演出的时候，观众坐在下边，反而效果，我觉得很好啊。
How would you say in Chinese food?
吃饭。
吃饭。
You know, for me, I play the character of translator, but really when we do in the rehearsal, I refuse to translate because that's easily to put my own opinion to either to Hui, to the actors, or to them, because I don't know which part is mine or is theirs. So sometimes when I translate and just like, okay, what, you know, I just like it's kind of difficult.
Quite often we deliberately put two people working together who can't talk the same language, so they have to work through movement or through feeling or through music. So a lot of it is the battle to overcome language difference, because I think that's very symbolic of how people are always striving to communicate over really quite big barriers.
我说你对上海有什么印象？完他就说上海什么什么东西，外滩什么之类的。我有的东西听懂，有的东西听不懂。完了以后他就说那个 bond 好像是外滩的这个单词吧。完了后来结果说这是什么东西 bond， 完了他给我比划说的那个 river bond， 完了讲到蹦的时候他 river bond， 结果我就误会了。完了以后呢他就bond， 我想这个bond是吧，咣当掉河里了。完了以后他就说什么？完了我说你掉河里了，游泳掉河里了。他就觉得特别好笑就笑了，你知道吗？完了后来翻译过来以后，我们大家都笑了，就是真是鸡同鸭讲。
Boom, next to the river.
你去河里游泳，游泳。
游泳 in English is.
Very good.
Oh, you speak English?
No. English. Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye bye.
During the initial workshop, we argued a lot, and there were moments when Hui would go, oh! And just no, this cannot be right. Oh, this is also weird. And of course, a lot of that is because at that point the character is not formed, so she doesn't know who she's playing, and neither do the other actors, and that is difficult for an actor who is used to having a script and sort of working out their character that way. So we argued a lot, but the arguments are very fruitful because from that you get a sense of, well, she thinks that, he thinks that, like you have lots of different lines in music which make a harmony.
在文化差异上一定是有冲突的。为什么他理解的中国是很浅显的，而且他的这个理解的东西可能是片面的，所以他有的时候蛮坚持的。但是我就必须纠正他，因为我说这不代表你理解的中国，或者不代表你理解的中国的事物，不可能是这样的。西方跟中国还是有很大区别的，从情感的这个表达上和从情感的这种那个沟通上。虽然说情感大家都是一样，但是表达的方式和那个什么还是有区别的。你不能够拿你的认为，非得要我去那样做，我是做不来的，因为我不是西方人，我是中国人。
Chinese actors tend to prioritize emotion and are interested in a character's inner journey and in how they express themselves emotionally. A lot of which is rooted in the traditional forms, actually, even though it comes out in the modern ones. I think Western performers tend to be more interested in storytelling and in what happened next and in moving narrative forward, and that's rooted in a culture based on progress, you know.
How would you describe your experience of working with the international director and artists?
Because I worked with the foreign director before, and so I just feel like and also the language is not the problem. So I just feel like, okay, it shouldn't be any problem, right? But actually it's not. Sometimes, you know, you feel like too comfortable with the language. The language sometimes can trick you, you know? And so actually I feel like somehow I kind of envy Hui and them, because more direct, because they want to make all the more difficult thing to become simple. And for me, talk to Michael, actually sometimes it's a very simple thing. And we, because of my Chinese background, American background, and the understands difference, so we can just make it so complicated. So it's just like actually, you know, to different direction. So I feel like that's the difficult part. We're too relied on language. Language just like, you know, the information exchange, not just like emotion, all those stuff.
China and the UK have completely different cultures.
Yes.
I would say both of them can be fairly conservative.
Yeah.
So are you facing any challenges when you are trying to cross this border?
Yeah, I mean, on both sides, actually. So you're right. I mean, both countries can be very conservative, but and I think all countries can be, actually. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't challenge it. In fact, it means you should, because otherwise the world will never get better. And I mean, it's not a preachy play, actually. It's not saying this is what we have to do. It's more to do with looking at the way people are living now and some of the emotional issues around that, and the fact that people are very lonely, and it's asking if there are ways out of this isolation, and I think there are. I think it's to do with an emotional honesty and striving towards a human truth. And that's not necessarily something that we're going to do through political structures. You know, I think it's something that's going to happen in the heart.
Why do you think the mixing of cultures is important in contemporary society? What is the philosophy behind what the company is trying to achieve?
Well, the mixing of cultures is something which is happening in contemporary society. It's a very basic fact about who we are. You know, China has opened up since the 80s in a huge way and is now much, much more engaged with the outside world than it ever was for centuries before. It's not just you know, since the revolution. And Britain, you know, now has people coming in. Well, it's had people for many decades coming from its former colonies. Now it has people coming from Europe. So it's a fact. It's the world we live in, and that means it's something that we have to think about, because it is changing everything. And well, it's a culture, and theatre is part of a culture. So theatre cannot be any more about what it feels like to be British, because that doesn't mean anything in the same way anymore.
And also it's unavoidable. It's, you know, now it's a global village, right? And then we are all whole family. And then so we, rather than just like say, okay, Chinese, Japanese, British, we just basically to know what we're all human beings. We all have a problem. Not only you, and I have the problem too. And every time when, you know, there's something between us, and let's just like think about, okay, did I do something wrong? Or is there anything that understood or translate or something like that? So I think it's very important to have this kind of culture sort of exchange thing.
It was very late.
已经很晚了。
She put down her bag, took off her coat and shoes.
她放 放下礼包
Look at the character for love, 爱, and there's a heart in the middle, and the bottom part is friendship, right? And the top is the roof of a house. But in the simplified character, the heart has gone. And I want to put the heart back into love.
苏晨，憋着好吗 ？Don't go.
As this tour is almost at its end,
Yes.
so what comes next?
I hope what comes next is that we take this show to China, and that we're aiming to do that later on this year, and it'll be amazingly exciting to see how an audience which comes in speaking Chinese and from a Chinese base reads the play, because again it'll be totally different. So what comes next is another voyage of discovery.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Emma.
for the work of you're doing at the moment, and I very much look forward to seeing many more productions crossing the borders and bringing the world together.
Thank you so much.